Now, I want to show you a video right now about that happening. And some of you know Susan Washington, some of you don't. But this is a video, and this is not from our crack video team, okay? This is from a flip camera, all right? And it wasn't intended to be public, but she's given me permission to share it with you guys. And I want you to see, this is a picture of what I'm talking about. When our purpose begins to become clear, people's lives get impacted, and they begin to start living their purpose. Now, before I show it, let me say this too. When I met Susan Washington, and she'll talk about having been on drugs and how it impacted her life, when I met her, I could hardly understand her. She could barely articulate words. You're going to hear a very articulate woman share a very powerful message right here. And medical people tell me that brain cells can't heal themselves. I believe it, but God can. And God has healed this woman's life, both spiritually, emotionally, and physically. It's a very powerful story. So you guys sit back. Let's go ahead and run that video, and I think you'll get the idea.
Thank you for having me tonight. I'm just going to share my story and share my heart and how God has totally transformed my life. I was born and raised in Dallas. I was the youngest of 3 children. I don't really have any memories of my younger life. My first real memory came when I was 10 years old on the 4th of July, and we were down at the lake. What had happened is my brother had committed suicide at our home in Dallas. He was 18 at the time. After his death, our lives drastically changed. We shut the doors to his room, and we never spoke about him again. It's like we pretended he never existed. Both my parents started drinking heavily after his death, and our family just started falling apart. When I was a sophomore in high school and I could drive, my father moved out. We had a lake house at Cedar Creek, and he moved down there, and it just left me alone with my mom. My mom was drunk every day. Every day I came home from school, she was passed out. She was a very severe alcoholic. One time I came in, and when I opened the door, there were perfume bottles everywhere, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And she had drank all the perfume because there was no alcohol in the house. One time she had drank rubbing alcohol. If she ran out of alcohol, she would go through DTs and start hallucinating, and I would have to take her to the hospital. It was a very lonely time, and I was very scared. But I pretended I was okay. I went to school every day. I was well liked among my peers. And when I graduated from high school, I graduated with honors, and no one came to my graduation, and I was really hurt by that. I think on some level I thought if I perform well enough, if I achieve enough, they'll pay attention to me, and that they would love me. And when I got home later that night, my mother walked into my room, and she was drunk, and I just hated her at that moment. And I told her to get the blank out of my room, that I just wish you were dead. And I'll never forget the look on her face as she backed out, and I shut my door. When I woke up the next morning, I found her body. And I was overwhelmed with guilt and shame. But I didn't know how to deal with it. I had no support system in place. And so I just pretended I was okay, and I went on with my life. After high school, I ended up going to stay with my sister for a while. And this was a happy time in my life. Kathy was 10 years older than me. She lived in Amarillo, so she had no idea how bad my home life was. She grew up in a completely different home than I did. Because my parents were just different parents back then. But when I lived with her, she was married, had young children. They sat down and ate dinner. I had never really done that. I didn't experience that. They went to church. I had never done that. I just knew she loved me unconditionally. It was just so nice to be somewhere where someone could give me a hug and just listen to me and have someone to talk to. I ended up staying in that area, and I went to WT, and I graduated. I got a Bachelor's of Science with a double major in special education and physical education, and I became a special education teacher. Around this time, I got married, and I started having my family. I taught for 6 years in Amarillo, and then we decided to move back to the Dallas area. And I got hired as a special education coordinator for Campbell ISD, which is a small district outside of Commerce. And I was really proud of that job. Things were going well then. But in 1998, my sister was diagnosed with cancer. And it wasn't long after that we knew she wasn't going to make it. And I just couldn't stuff it anymore. And I couldn't pretend anymore. And so I started doing drugs. And I'm not going to say I never experimented with drugs or drank. There were many times that I did, but I became a drug addict and started doing methamphetamine. My sister died on Memorial Day 1999. It was very ironic because my mom died on Memorial Day 1979. And I completely fell apart, and my life spiraled out of control. I got asked to leave the district where I was at because I wasn't going to work. I don't know if they suspected drug use or what. I was just absent all the time or not very late. And I got hired at Garland ISD. But that year was just a mess. And on April 19th, 2001, my husband was arrested at our home in Rockwall for manufacturing meth. I was also charged and indicted, and I was sent to a rehab in Overton, Texas. And the rehab was good. I mean, it gave me some time to reflect on my life and to maybe process some things. But I got out, and I went to live with my father. And I don't blame my father for anything. I'm accountable for all my choices. But it was just not a healthy relationship for me to be in. He would get drunk, and he would throw glasses of vodka in my face and tell me how he wished I would have died instead of Kathy. And I just couldn't take that. I just wasn't strong enough at the time. And then I also found out at this time that my teaching career was over. I don't know why I didn't realize that. I really thought I could just teach again. I didn't know they didn't really want felons to teach. But so it was kind of like, I don't know what I was thinking. But I had gotten a job as a sub, and when I told them what happened, they were like, we can't have you here. And I was very humiliated. And then long after that, I talked to someone else who said, Susan, he goes, you're not going to teach for a long time if you ever teach again. He goes, and you're going to lose your teaching certificate. And when that happened, I just felt hopeless, and I relapsed. And within a month, I had a new charge, which revoked my probation, and I was sent to prison. I was sent to prison for 2 years. I spent 1 year locked up, and I got out. I could tell you all kinds of stuff about prison, but just for the sake of time, I'm just going to talk about my life afterwards. But I got out of prison, and I was very lucky to have my husband, who worked very hard to save money, so he could find a place for us to live. It was very hard to find a place to live because people don't want to rent to felons. And but he found this old trailer that he let us rent if we paid about 7 months. He had saved a lot, so we could pay 7 months up front. And I was just so happy to be back with my family. I have 3 children, and one of them's here tonight, and so I'm just so thankful she's here. But because this has been hard on her too. But so I got out of prison, and I was humbled. Prison really humbled me, and I was like willing to do anything I could. I knew I couldn't teach, and so I went applying for jobs, and that was hard. I got a lot of rejection, but finally a Dickey's barbecue was opening up, and I went in and applied, and he hired me. And I left that day with my Dickey's hat and my Dickey's shirt. And, you know, if you would have told me 10 years before I would be on cloud 9 because I was hired as a drive-thru cashier at a Dickey's barbecue, making $7.25 an hour, I would have told you you were crazy. But I was so happy, and I was ready just to, like, rebuild my work history. So I started working at Dickey's, and it was about this time that I found God. My son Sammy had a best friend who died tragically in a snow skiing accident. And when that happened, I thought, they're going to fall apart. They're going to become alcoholics. They're going to drink perfume. You know, I based all my experiences on that, and that didn't happen. They were empowered with strength, hope, and courage, and I didn't know where that came from, but I knew I wanted that in my life. And so I started going to church in Wiley, New Hope Christian Church. And it wasn't long after that I met with the pastor, and he was like, Susan, he goes, you have got to get in a relationship with people. You know, I could talk to people, I could be friendly, but I wasn't letting anyone in. You know, and I left that night going, I can't tell these people I've been to prison, I'm a recovering drug addict, ex-con, felon, all these things. I go, they're going to reject me, and they're going to reject my kids. But I started attending this small group, and one night, the man who lost his son skiing was just sharing about some guilt he felt, about like not taking time with his son that he wished he would have, he regretted, just regret. And when he started talking, the picture, my last memory of my mother, the hurt on her face when I told her I wish she was dead, just popped into my mind, and I was broken. And I just fell apart, and I just started crying, and I started sharing with everyone in there just what I just shared with you. And not one person rejected me. You know, they just all loved me. me, and I'm in relationship with those people today. And some of them are my best friends. It was also around this time that this was a God thing. I was like at the drive-thru in Dickies, and my daughter works with me too. She was 15, and it was kind of embarrassing that we were both cashiers. but it was okay until I was working at the drive-thru, and this girl just drove through. She looked very successful, had a very nice car. You know, you just can tell. She was like, "I want to hire you to be my assistant." And I was like, "Well, okay. What do you do?" And I met with her. She was a sales counselor for Highland Homes. And I go, "I have to tell you, I was like ready to be up front always. I'm always up front." And I just told her my story, and she was like, "I don't care." And she goes, "I still want to hire you." And she just touched my arm and said, "I'm sorry you've had such a hard life." And so I'm still working for Highland Homes as a sales assistant today. Relationships are just very important in my life. I have a good friend who, we were renting that old trailer that stuff would break, he wouldn't fix it. He knew he kind of had us over a barrel. And I had a friend that I met at church who said, "I have a house, and I'll rent it to you, and I'll work with you on your rent, because it's real hard. It was real hard for me to pay stuff on the first, and then we would accrue late fees." And she's here tonight too. And I'm just so thankful to these relationships in my life. And I have a boss today who supports me and who's there. I just have people in my life, and it's not just financial, that I know I can go to. And it's just been so special because I don't have any family left. I have my kids and my husband, but there's no cousins, grandparents, there's no one. And I felt so terribly alone for so long, but these relationships have made such a difference. And the last thing I want to share with you is back in, last year or so, the housing market fell apart. And so my hours were cut drastically. I was working 53 hours a week, so I was getting 13 hours of overtime, and I went down to 33. And I decided to see about getting my teaching certificate back. And people wrote letters, and then I wrote a letter. And on Christmas Eve 2008, I got a letter from TEA saying they reinstated my certificate. And so now I'm a valid teacher again, and I know there's still challenges because many districts aren't going to hire felons, but I believe that God will open a place. And God has brought me to Seed Sowers, and I love going in that prison every Friday. It's where I'm supposed to be, but not really, But that's where, and so I just love it. It is such a great ministry, and I just want to thank you very much for listening to